action. We think there's more discussion. And actually people who are believers or people who acknowledge this religion, even within these people, there are people who recognize and doubt that treatment, that unequal treatment between men and women. But these people can't do anything about it right now. Why? Because these people have been brought up in this certain religion, and this religion has been grown up to be part of their core identity. And so when something is part of your core identity, it is very hard to go against that identity, even if you have doubts to certain parts of it. And we think that when women have been brought up to be Christians, or have been brought up to be certain religions, even though they doubt, or even though they believe that they should be treated equally as men, they should be allowed to become priests. It's very hard for them to do that act because they are feared to fall into an identity crisis, or they are fearing that the society would actually be outrageous against them, and they would not be able to be part of that community anymore. All of that societal pressure does not allow these people to actually pursue the rights that they actually already recognize that would maximize their happiness. And this is why the government, who is entitled to provide these equal rights to these citizens, must come in and actually provide these opportunities to these people. And what's going to happen after taking this proposal is that these people who actually believed, who actually wanted equal treatment between genders, but have been oppressed by religion, now they can be equally treated. We think it's very important that these people who have these kind of perceptions come into societies, because these are the only actors which can pursue or which can continue to spread this kind of perspective and raise protection towards people who are discriminated today. And for all those reasons, we are very proud to propose.
Leaders spoke for 6 minutes and 58 seconds. We thank the lady for her speech. We now invite the member of opposition to open the lower opposition case.
Thank you, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Under the motion, this House believes that equal opportunity legislation be extended to religious institutions. Now, from closing opposition today, we have one thing to say. Religion is a choice, and religion, we believe, is necessary to be independent. That is what we need in our society. Now, in the opening house of our debate, we had basically an argument over the legitimacy of the government. And then what happened was that basically it was legitimate to act. Now, from the closing opposition today, we basically want to talk about why religion must be independent from government, irrespective of religion, and I'm going to actually analyze that in 2 levels. But before I actually get into my substantial argument, I'm going to actually take a look at what our government side gave today in today's debate. So, the government side today, from closing it, they keep piling about this argument about the woman and the priest and how a woman should be a priest. Well, we from closing the opposition actually look at this big crux of this debate into one idea. It's not about women not being able to become a priest. As we know, as we raised in our POI, a priest in Christian religion, in the value of the belief system, it requires an acquisition of respect within the system. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in that belief system, it's basically stating that people do not actually have that belief towards the woman. So, in the status quo, we implement this policy, and we go to women, now you guys can all be priests. All these women filed to become priests, and they become priests. We have a utopia. Okay, equal opportunity. The problem is solved. No, ladies and gentlemen, these women become priests, and that the people within the religion don't believe these women priests. They don't actually have the legitimacy, and the people, as there's no solvency to the problem. And the fact is that because of the fact that these women do not get the deserving rights as equal rights of the priests, there's actually more problems because of the fact that male priests and women priests do not have an equal standing. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we're saying is, we don't just stand. What we're saying is, the gradual change needs to come from within the religion, not some kind of radical change in government intervention. Government just doesn't pop in and solve the problem. They actually create more problems by trying to create some kind of equality. We're saying that there's no solvency to this issue, and they create more problems and they exacerbate the problem. So, no thank you, sirs. And today, opening government, we talked about, well, how government bills, they to engender everyone to social norms? Well, we have two levels of analysis on this. We tell you, first of all, that these bills, they're based on majority rule by the mass population. And so the fact that the majority rules over the minority. But my second level of analysis is that they use the term social norms. Well, we continually ask you, no thank you, sir. We continually ask you from our opposition bench is that what is a social norm, ladies and gentlemen? There is no objective standard for what a social norm is. And basically on that fact, because the fact that it's a majority rule pushing with minorities, in a moment, sir, a majority rule pushing with minorities, and the idea that there's no objective standards, it's not just the fact that a government bill engendered ever introduced as well. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we talked about internal change. This change and this trend within this religion hasn't changed for more than 1,000 years. How is it going to internally change all this?
Sir, opening opposition today continually told you that way back then, witches were burned and people were stoned. We see people getting thrown in the river because of the fact that they might be a witch. No, this was the gradual change that occurred. We didn't have some kind of government pop in or act and say, you should do this. And that's exactly what we're talking about. As I gave you the example about women and priests. Women being able to be priests is a gradual change that should occur. They should actually have within their religion when the woman can actually get the respect, and that is when the actual equal opportunity occurs. It's not just being forced into wishes that they're going to be disadvantaged at. So to move on to my substantials today about the perspective of religion and why it deserves to be exempt from the government and it should be independent. Now, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, we see in government is that majority opinion and majority rule. What we see is that each and every religion deserves to be left alone and recognized for what it is. We're saying that with this majority rule, government is looking to override these religions, overpower these religions, and in the end, because of a government decision on some kind of higher moral standing, what happens is that we create a triumph of a particular religion over another, based on the fact that because of the majority of the government that supports a particular religion, but the minority religion that does not get supported, certain religions triumph over others. And this is the fact that we need to have an independence of some kind of majority rule that this government can overpower and overrule religion. We should not overpower or overrule religion. They need to be independent as we value the diversity of the religions as their own, as the minorities and the minorities. But my second level of analysis is that we can actually create more states, we can actually create more social chaos by actually doing this, ladies and gentlemen. What we're doing by basically passing this motion is opening a social standard for a blame game, where one religious institution can be jumped upon by other religions based on a decision government makes. Now, government actually makes a decision, and they have some kind of statement on some kind of higher moral standing that one religion can have over another religion. What we believe government's role is to embrace differences and diversities. We don't actually create a higher moral ground for one religion or a certain value belief system over another religion. Now, if we have this motion passed, we can have actually one religion putting on higher moral standards, and that this religion will be able to blame other religions based on the fact that they are not on higher moral standards. It's basically I'll give you an example. Let's say in today's world we pass this motion, and that Christianity is placed on a higher moral standard, and the other minority religions are dragged to Christianity. Then Christianity and these other minorities can actually blame Islam for being not on the higher moral standing, and everybody can jump onto this higher moral standing and actually say that they are on higher social standing, so we can actually blame the Islamic religion and place the social blame. And what actually happens from this social blame and this conflict is that it actually creates conflict between religions, and that other religions feel that they've been derided upon by other religions because of the fact that government made such decisions, some kind of statement to say that one religion is morally higher than the other, which is exactly wrong in our state society, ladies and gentlemen. Each and every religion has its own place, has its own meaning, has its own value, and that's why we should leave them as independent, and we should enforce this value upon other religions. The fact that we want to have differences and diversities and uniqueness in one society together, not one religion being bashed upon by a group of religions based on a moral standing decision that a government can make through an announcement or through a statement, because of the fact that the government's influence is so great and the effects of government can be so great. So what we today came to from opposing opposition is that, based on the idea that if you force a woman into a priest's position, that's not equality of opportunity. That's actually creating more problems, and that's exacerbating the problem in the status quo. And the government should always pursue policies that actually can have solvency. We don't want government to suddenly say to pursue a policy that can exacerbate the problem. And our extensions today, on the perspective of religion, why should they be independent from the government? Because of the fact that we value diversity, we value differences, and that government should never look to override or overpower religions. And my second level of analysis on that, we should never open a social standard for the blame game, ladies and gentlemen. We We stand for closing opposition to tell you that religions need to be independent in our society. Government should not interfere. Religions need to stand as they are today in the status quo. And Madam Speaker, I beg you to sign a negative ballot. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the opening opposition came up here and said, well, Jesus has never said that the women can never become a priest. Well, have you realized that Jesus has neither have said, well, only male can be the priest, right? Well, we don't think so. So it's not about the matter of the interpretation. The question that we have to ask in this debate at the end of the day is that whether the government should be justified to actually limit some of the rights that is actually given to the individuals, which is the religious freedom of expression of the religion, and we believe it is totally justified, and the government has its obligations and responsibility to actually step inside within that right with Madam Speaker. So that's why we're still very proud to be on the proposition side in this class today. Now, before moving on to the questions and criteria, I'm going to rebut a couple of the points from the member of the opposition. When he firstly talked about, well, by taking this model is going to make the prioritization with amongst the religious groups of the organizations. But Madam Speaker, we don't think that's the case because the equality is actually as one of the basic human rights, right? It's a fundamental human right which everybody has a clear standard, which was the consistent standard in the opening government, Madam Speaker. Well, thank you, Madam. Well, allowing a woman to have in the same position as a male can be the very, very clear criteria to actually achieve to achieve the equality. We don't think that it's going to make the prioritization amongst the religious groups of the organization because everybody is going to follow the same norm which the government is implementing by taking this bond. Well, thank you, sir. Now, moving on to the criterion whether the government is justified to actually step on limits of the rights of the religions, Madam Speaker. Well, the opening government side had done a pretty good job about establishing the rights of the capacity of the government, how the government is able to actually limit the rights of the religions in terms of the government has a strong power, authority to actually limit the choices over the beliefs of the religion, and also they have talked about the check and balance system and so forth. Madam Speaker, we believe that the government in the first place has the capacity. Now, what did the opposition side entirely talked about? Well, they have doubted firstly that the equality is vague. Well, Madam Speaker, putting the woman in the same position and giving the equal right to the male is clearly unequal equality, right? So we believe in the first place that the equality is a clear social standard which the religions have to fix if there is a problem, Madam Speaker. Now, and then the opening opposition side also conceded to the fact if there's a detrimental harm, the religion has to actually fix that, right? But the question that we have to ask is that whether the religion has actually realized that their entire norm is actually justified or unjust, right? So we believe that they have talked about, well, stoning is a matter of the fact that they have abandoned. But Madam Speaker, we don't think that's the case and that it's not actually applicable into today's round. Well, thank you, sir. Why is that? Well, we have talked about how maybe the way of the punishment has been changed, but the way of the perception towards equality between the male and the female has not been changed. We don't think that has been realized, Madam Speaker. Well, also the closing opposition that came up and talked about, well, the religion itself is going to change and it is bad when the government or the external factor actually steps in because there is going to be antipathy towards the government, right? But Madam Speaker, we never think that's the case because firstly, whether these religious groups have actually been realized that there is an inequality is actually going on within the organizing religious institutions. And second, well, or do they have an incentive to change the norm? No, thank you guys, sorry. We don't think so because the priest is the males can't actually have this dominant authority upon to the priest, right? The consensus in today's round was that the priest has a lot of power, right? They're on top of it. So we don't think that the male, even if the male is actually realizing to the fact that the situation is not that justified, we don't think that the males are likely to actually change the system of the religious institution in the second place. Now, thirdly, even if they are trying to actually change the system within the religions, they have never explained how they're going to do that, Madam Speaker. We have, on the other hand, the government side entirely talked about how the government is able to actually change the system, right? And as a consequence, we believe in the first place, the government should actually justify and step in to change the system in the religious organization. Well, thank you, sir. And what my partner had actually further analyzed of the government about this concept of the equality, well, thank you, sir, is that why every individual should actually have this fundamental human rights, right? Well, Madam Speaker, what my partner had clearly talked about in terms of two aspects is that firstly, there's a social contract that is actually abided between the government and the citizens, right? Citizens are actually doing its own duty to pay taxes or contribute to the society or to abide to the law, not the part of society, right? So as a consequence, the government has to pay back to give the right in the first place, and the right is actually the equality. But the problem that we have had under the status quo is to actually ensure not ensuring the equality, especially in the religious organizations, because of the structural problem that the female can never override this male kind of thing. As a consequence, no, thank you, sir, sorry. What my partner secondly talked about, the system within the norm of the religious organizations are changing. The character given by the opening government was that often the times within the female, they are a lot of the times blinded, right? So the governmental role is to make them realize that the system itself is bad. And what my partner had talked about was that some are actually starting to actually realize that the system of the religious organizations is wrong. Madam Speaker, why is that? Well, she has talked about how these females are exposed to the democratic society where the social standard is that we have to push forward the norm of the equality, Madam Speaker. So even though that the women are realizing to the fact that the religious organizations are sometimes unequal and unjust, well, they have no other way to actually ask help for, Madam Speaker. As a consequence, the government has an obligation and responsibility to actually step in and regulate some of the rights that the religious organization has, Madam Speaker. As a consequence, Madam Speaker, what we have told you from the closing government side is very, very clear. The government, the reason why there is this basic whole concept of the human rights, but these concepts have not been ensured, and the government has an obligation to actually step in, to actually save the women who are suffering, and make the women realize that you guys need the equality, right? So just because you were born as a female, and just because you were born in the religious community, entire choices of these individuals are firstly blinded, and even though your eyes are open and exposed to society, your choices cannot be achieved, Madam Speaker. In order to achieve the equality, and in order to follow the norm within the society, we're very much proud to propose. Thank you.
Speakers go for 7 minutes.
Thank the speaker for her speech.
We now invite the opposition.
Now, we have a very naive government who's saying that government can do everything. Government has an objective standard who can pursue upon what is good for everybody and can decide upon what is good and bad, what is religiously right or religiously bad. We believe that religion is something subjective that has to be independent from the government, that has to be respected with its own value. That is a reason why the diversity of religion exists in our society, and that is a reason why we believe that the religion itself should be respected with its own belief system. Now, let me first move on to some of the rebuttal to the arguments that the closing government side has came up with in 3 levels, and move on to the 3 questions that I have identified in today's debate. Now, number 1, concerning equality. Now, closing government has continuously emphasized to you that equality is a common social norm. Equality idealistically is a social norm. However, how they interpret what equality is and what the standard of equality is differs from the religious system to religious system from the value system that each individual that government does not have the neutral standard, the objective standard to decide upon which is exactly an equal standard to pursue for. Exactly. And then, for example, in a case of India or in some region, in those regions, they believe that cows and pigs are a better being than human beings. That is actually the equality that they believe in. That is the reason why the social norms differ from society to society and from religion to religion. And this is the reason why the change has to come naturally, because the standard itself is too vague. The second analysis on the rebuttal, considering how we're only changing the punishment to be when the social change comes naturally, and the perception does not change. So how exactly, by implementing this policy, will you be able to change the perception? As the member of the opposition has proven to you, the perception only changes when the society believes in certain things, and that is why the reason why we believe that change can come naturally and should only come naturally. That we believe that priest is a vocation in which should be respected and should be valued, that he can only do his job through that, and within that value system, the perception cannot change, but in government enforcing a religious institution to act in a certain way. Number three, considering that them saying that religious institution has no incentive to change. Now, then prove to us how the religion in the current society has evolved from the past from a society in a way in which we stone killed women to death, into a society where we believe that it is, we socially believe that it is wrong. That is a reason why we believe there exists a sufficient incentive for the religious institution to evolve itself naturally. Yes, sir.
So this bill exists itself, made it for everybody and brought social change. Even the gay people cannot be discriminated to go to the military. Why fundamentally this law is existed, these institutions, religious institutions can be accepted.
We believe religious institution is based upon value system. Religious institution, I'm answering your POI. Religious institution is basically different from any kind of private entity because its basic fundamental background is upon value system. And we believe the government does not have any kind of neutral standing to say no to that. Now, moving on to the three clashes that I have identified in today's debate. Number one, considering how equality, which is a value judgment, can be achieved. And second of all, how society changes. Second clash, is government a legitimate actor to impose sanction upon religious institutions? Third, why religious institution needs to be independent from the government. Now, let me just directly move on to the first clash. How equality, which is a value judgment, can be achieved and how society changes. Now, government side has continuously said that religious institution does not have the check and balance system, does not have the incentive to progress according to the social norm. Now, what the opposition from the opening side to the closing side has been sustaining to you. Number one, change in social norms comes from within the religious only naturally. And the reason why it took thousands of years for us to bring the change is because that's how long it takes for the society to change and perceive the change within themselves. By just forcing them into a certain belief, especially when it's based upon their belief, will not bring the change. Second also, considering that only through that change, the defective change can only be brought upon when the respect and when the value system is there. We told you today that when the motion passes, that women will be able to become a priest. However, we believe as a priest who basically lives up with the respect and value of the people, that people should listen to what priest is saying. We believe that the change of the people's perception, the believer's perception, can only come naturally, not by the government forcing them to do so. And second clash, concerning is the government legitimate actor to impose sanction upon religious institution. Now they said the government should promote equality. We're not saying that government should promote equality. What we're saying is that equality should be something that is already that the society is already basing upon, not something that they themselves is only believing upon. Government is not a sacred God who can be neutral, who can be fully objective. society. As we can see in the example of caste system within India, in that places, government believes that there is a social difference within the caste system. Now they're going to say what's equal is for them to be in their situation, and that is clearly that clearly demonstrates how government cannot be neutral because government itself is a subjective institution. Moving on to the last question, why religious institution needs to be independent from the government. Now, we're not saying that religious institution is not abiding by general laws. Now, religious institutions should also abide by general laws, such as they shouldn't be killing, people, stoning people to death, or should not, intrude into somebody, break into somebody's house. But under that general law, we believe the government should not take an active action to intervene upon what is private to them and what is their own righteous right.